Thank you again for coming all the way to join us.
It's a pleasure.
We're going to look at the trailer for Superman, and then we're going to get started.
Are you being serious right now?
Yeah,
You'd let me interview you as Superman.
sure.
Ready?
Let's do it, Cronkite.
Superman.
Miss Lane.
Recently, you've come under a lot of fire for
I
what
know,
some
it's a
might.
lot of
it's
fire,
it's
but-
a lot. Today, the Secretary of Defense said he was going to look into your actions. That's funny?
My actions? I stopped a war.
Maybe.
Not maybe, I did.
In effect, you illegally entered a country.
This is how you're gonna be?
I'm not the one being interviewed, Superman. Did you consult with the president?
No.
You seemingly acting as a representative of
I
the
wasn't
United States
representing
will cause
anybody
more
except for me.
problems around the world.
And doing good.
I would question myself in the same situation and consider the consequences.
People were going to die. Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
Your choices, your actions. That's what makes you who you are.
Superman. He's not a man. He's an it. He's somehow become the focal point of the entire world's conversation. I will not accept that.
I cleaned your boots. I'll go get them for you.
You have a dog?
Amazing. I can't wait to see that on the big screen. Can't wait. Henry, what is the job of a DP?
Well, there's a short answer to that, which is the DP is responsible for the photography of a movie. But the real answer to that is the DP is responsible for putting the director's vision, personality, and style of storytelling on the screen. So that's what's fascinating about what we all do, in fact, all as filmmakers and collaborators on any movie, is getting to understand the director. And you know, the most interesting movies and the most exciting movies where the personality of the director is stamped all over that particular movie. Because you go to see a James Gunn movie because you know the kind of style of storytelling. But a Doug Liman movie will be very, very different. And name your director, and I'm sure lots of people here who work with different directors, that's what's fascinating. And actually, even with the same director in a different movie, really the challenge is to forget anything that went in the past and start from scratch with a clean sheet of paper.
How do you get into the mind of a director?
It really depends on the director. I mean, with somebody like James, James is a writer, so it starts with the script, and a lot of it's written in the script. in fact, he will storyboard assiduously because he's a very visual director. And that's where the conversations start from. And then it's about talking, and on this kind of movie, it's a bit like building a huge skyscraper. So the talking is very structured in terms of we sit down several times a week and have formal meetings with all of us to talk through ideas, problems, solutions, and what the ideas are going to be, as well as informal discussions. So it's a long process, and it's an intense process, but I always think it's the best bit about filmmaking.
I would imagine it gets a little easier every film with the same director.
Not necessarily, actually. I think the pressure is to, look at the movie you're doing on its own merits.
Okay.
So making assumptions about the past is not helpful. I think really every movie is different.
Tell me what you mean, when you say you want someone to talk to. That was the title. So now we're going to understand that.
Don't tell my wife, because she doesn't think I talk to anybody. But, so the first, movie making is a collaborative process. So as you begin to evolve an idea, the first thing I do, and I think we all do, is start talking to our fellow filmmakers about how we're going to do that idea. And it's interesting, we're in this environment here because we're with lots of manufacturers and suppliers, all of whom are kind of critical to that process of this is the idea, how are we going to do that? Because it could be the technology doesn't exist in the form that we want it to make that idea happen. And it's just a simple flip to do what we need to do. And I think, nowadays we've been set free. Technology is faster. When I started, and I'm sure lots of people, film was great, but it was, well, are you going to shoot Kodak or Fuji? Are you going to shoot anamorphic or spherical? And what camera were you going to use, Arriflex or Panavision? That was pretty much the choice. And yes, people were inventive about how they moved the camera. I mean, I trained on a DP who had started as the loader on the African Queen, and I've got these wonderful pictures of a huge Technicolor camera being pulled up. I mean, they didn't have cranes or anything. That was interesting. One of the first movies made a color movies made on location in the jungle in Africa. So they didn't have cranes and dollies and all the rest of it, and they literally had the chippies build ramps to pull the camera up and all the rest of it, and it's phenomenal. So yes, people were very, very inventive, but nowadays I think the rules have changed, and as filmmakers we can be disruptive, inventive, and original, and that's where the conversation starts with. So that's what I do, is I start talking to all my fellow collaborators, be it in lighting and my assistant Dermot or the grips, because we're looking firstly to set up the philosophy of what the movie is. That means the way we're going to think about the movie. What are the rules? Are there rules? And if so, what are they? And then the second thing is, how are we going to go about doing that? And that just starts with talking. And I think it's a really, really crucial thing to do. And often that starts with, also talking to manufacturers. And that's how, I started talking to you guys, because I had a real difficult problem to solve. And you guys were very easy to talk to and wanted to engage.
So Jared put the black box right in front of you, something like that.
But I share Jared's outlook on life as being disruptive. So I went to see him and said, I've got this problem. The studio want to shoot this movie on large format, but I can't see how this is going to work, because it's going to be this huge big camera. And that's not what the idea is. What can you do? And he kind of reached under his desk in his Aladdin's cave of stuff and came up with this black box. I don't think any of it actually worked, but he said it did. And that was the start of Red's sort of journey into small cameras with large formats. And that, I think, in cinema history is very, very significant.
What else changed the rules in that time?
I think, I think I shot one of the very first digital movies years ago called Flyboys, which is in 2005.
I remember that.
Which was with prototype Genesis cameras.
Genesis, yep.
Yeah, which were actually pretty good. But the reason I did it was there was an awful lot of flying in the movie, and I had a lot of experience in aerial photography when I first started. So I knew that, I'd had all these airplanes in the air. This is set in World War I, about a group of American airmen. And the sun would be setting, and one plane would be running out of gas, and another one would have engine trouble, and it would all be happening, and I'd have 10 feet of film left in the camera. And I thought, I know this is going to be problematic. And just at that time, this technology was starting to come through. And we decided very quickly about that. Very brave producer, and I shot something, took it down to the biggest screen I could find in London, which is the Odeon Leicester Square, and put it up. And we thought, this looks pretty good. But I really had to understand what I was doing and rethink, because the digital medium was entirely different to the film medium. So you had to think differently about it as a photographic medium. So I would say digital photography, yes, was one of the biggest disruptors. I mean, filmmakers generally would say, sound mixing, non-linear editing, all those kind of things. Visual effects, actually, I don't think are new. They've been around in filmmaking forever, literally forever. It's the same principles, it's just got more sophisticated, but it's the same idea and same principles. But I think the physical size for us in cameras, the physical size combined with the large chip format or negative format, whatever you want to call it, is very, very, very significant.
Now, I know stabilization is very important to you, and you've used your stabilized system since 2015. You started with drone and went to handheld. Can you talk about the evolution of that system?
Well, the moment you make a camera that's the size of a Hasselblad, then, if you think about all the cameras that we could use, they're all pretty big and heavy. So, we've got cameras here, they're all on tripods because it's hard to hold them for a long time. So if you miniaturize the technology, then you can think very differently about what you do. So I was interested in making the camera participate and getting the audience to be kind of within the scene as opposed to on the outside of the scene. So traditionally we'd think of shooting handheld, but on an IMAX screen that's quite a statement, and in fact is too much. I think you just get seasick after a bit. So, and of course handheld has its place, but it's a different thing. And so I was looking for a way of being able to put the camera in very specific positions where I wanted to be, but I didn't want the audience to be aware of what was going on. And at that point, I went to talk to my friend David Freeth, who is an inventor and a genius in this kind of thing. And we started coming up with small-scale stabilization. But it's the sophistication of that sort of has evolved since 2015.
How does it differ from being a Steadicam?
Well, Steadicam is obviously based on counterbalance, and I think all of us could identify a Steadicam shot in any movie. It has a float. I mean, I used to have a Steadicam when I did documentaries, and great tool. But it's a big lump of stuff that kind of gets in the way. So because it's got inertia, it means the camera glides, and if I were to pan from me to you, it would come to a steady stop. Gyro stabilization allows you to be much, much more sophisticated than that. And you can do that, but you can also tune it like a musical instrument so that you can make it work like our eyes work. If you think how our eyes work, we don't slowly pan around a room. We flip from one thing to another. And in cinema, we sort of replace that with cuts. But with stabilization now, you can, well, I can make the camera completely intuitive, and that's the way I like to work.
How does this new technique develop for your relationship with the actors?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because, actors in movie acting, classically the camera is well, of course it moves everywhere, and there's some really brilliant people who move the camera beautifully. But fundamentally, the philosophy is we block a scene and we say, well, Naida, you're going to end up sitting there, so we're going to put a mark on the floor so everyone knows that's where you're going to sit and that's your position, because you're going to hit the light, and the guys are going to place the camera to you at that point. That's how it's been done for a long time. This is a different way of thinking. It means that the actors play the scene. Any actor will know where to be within the space of a room, but really what determines the space is the relationship between the actors playing the scene and the relationship in the space. So in this version, I can place the camera wherever we need to place the camera, depending on what the intent is. So we obviously discuss that at length with the director. But the actors act to each other, not to the camera, because I can put the camera where it needs to be. So it's a dance, and it's very different to the mathematics and the geometry of everyone moving around in a kind of geometric dance to do something, and it's a very, very different feeling. And sometimes it takes people a little bit of getting used to.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, totally. And but I think universally everyone I've worked with loves it, because it becomes about the acting. It doesn't become about, but I need you to turn your face a bit to, it doesn't, none of that's evolved. And it's very, so from my point of view, it's very precise and it's completely intuitive. And what I try to do is really obviously get under the director's skin, so we know what's motivating where the camera is, and from the actor's point of view, they can be oblivious to where the camera is.
So you light 360?
Totally, unlike the set, because if you come to a close-up, the light that you've lit for the set should work exactly. Even if you're going to relight it, it has to relate to what the wider shot is. So
there's got to be some challenges in that.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's just a mindset. If you think about, rather than thinking about individual shots, you sit back and you think about the whole, then everything fits in.
Well,
I mean, but even in, if you have a camera on a dolly, somebody's going to walk in the door and you're going to swing around 360 and see, so it's not that different from.
Did you push your rig for Superman more than before? Is it even faster now? I'm always trying to dig into the rig.
Nothing ever stays still, as you guys will.
Oh.
No, I'm always pestering for something. I try and move everything forward each time. But really what I'm interested in is making things smaller, simpler, and lighter.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? That's interesting.
So, to me, the footprint of the camera is significant. So the smaller it is, the less intrusive it is, and the more connected to what we're photographing it is. If I'm going to hold it, then I don't want to hold a big lump of stuff. And all the people I work with are really, really good at this and understanding this, is simplification it leads to clarity in absolutely everything. So,
Okay.
but we were talking about what is revolutionary. The miniaturization is revolutionary because you can strip everything down.
And then when you're shooting for the big screen, so you've got this big film, but you've got these tight moments. So you bring kind of a closer.
Well, one of the beauties of large format, of any large format, is that you can shoot with wider lenses. And of course, as you'll know from the geometry of lenses, you know, a wide lens on 35mm film is pretty horrendous if you put it here. But on a large format, be it VistaVision or 65mm, it's you're not shooting a 14mm or a 21mm. You're actually shooting two lenses optically
Right.
tighter. So what does that do? That enables you to shoot wider and closer and to tell the story in what's going on in the background at the same time as what's going on in the foreground. So you don't have to force the director into cutting into a wide shot saying, look how clever we are, we've built this great big set and doesn't it look lovely? Or now we'll go back into the action.
Yeah.
You can unveil it to the audience. And of course the audience is very sophisticated, so you can unveil it to the audience bit by bit, and it's integral to the storytelling.
Do your lenses change the way you were talking about each film is different, starting with script? Can you talk a little bit about your process in choosing lenses per, or does it just depend, or do you like a certain?
Well, I think in terms of every movie gravitates towards its own lens sizes, and the process I like to use is just when I'm scouting, I just take a camera with me and I start just shooting material. A, because I build up a library of material to work on colour before we start shooting, but secondly, you just start to get a feel for which kind of lenses, I mean in their kind of optical length, are working for the story. And so it's just an instinctive process, I think, and I think anybody in photography will say the same thing. You know, you end up shooting on a very small number of lenses. Yes, you have. Yeah, I mean, I'll just see the picture. But yeah, so
Yeah, that's you.
it's. I think it's just specific to the movie, and that's what I mean. You know, really, what you're trying to do is find an individual voice for each particular movie. Yeah.
Has previs changed?
Well, not really. I mean, previs is just a process of animating a sequence, and it tells you whether, you know, cuts work. I'm sure if Buster Keaton were around, he would use previs because he was the absolute master of knowing where a gag works and where it doesn't work. I mean, if you want a masterclass, watch what he does. And previs is a good way of testing that, and it tests whether the cuts that you think you need, or the director thinks they need, work. And then it becomes a incredibly useful tool to all of the filmmakers and collaborators, you know, whether it's the special effects guys, the stunt group, the, you know, production design, whatever it is, because we all look at this animation together and say, well, this is how we're going to break it down, and this is the methodology for shooting the sequence. The golden rule I have with anybody doing the previs is that I talk through them the general principles of what I would do in the sequence in terms of where I put the camera, the type of lenses I'd use for that scene, and where previs is not helpful is when the camera is put in positions that's impossible to put it in.
Yeah.
And then it's pointless.
Right. Physicality is really important with you. Can you tell them a little bit about some of those rigs that you're actually in? You're in a rig sometimes. Sometimes you're on wires.
That's true. That's true. It's quite entertaining for everybody. It's not a pretty sight. It's just because it's an extension of what you can do. So if you have a camera stabilized like that, you can do anything. You know, a bit like the Steadicam, you could walk and step onto a crane. In this, actually, you can walk along and they can pick you up on a wire and then plonk you down on something else. But the reason I do it is because for a lot of, and particularly on a movie like Superman, a lot of the moves, I'm trying to get away from something that looks mechanical. I'm trying to make something that looks instinctive and natural.
And you're in the center a lot of the time. Or the center of the action? Or?
Yeah, because we're trying to put the audience, on a movie like this, we're trying to put the audience inside the movie, not outside the movie.
That's wonderful.
And the outside would be, you know, outside the ring on a longer lens. But I don't, there's a very different, it's a very, very different thing, physicality of capturing a performance if I'm photographing from here, same size shot, to photographing from back there on the same size shot. It's a completely different statement.
You were talking to me about Barry Lyndon and kind of how manufacturers, like sometimes people will choose, something will come out of. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how the manufacturers or this process of kind of collaboration with service providers and manufacturers and like how those ended up being NASA lenses or something like that?
Well, it's an absolute, you know, when we say we need to talk, that's exactly what it is. You know, Kubrick was, I would say, a disruptive filmmaker, and he wanted, obviously, to shoot that movie with natural light and natural candlelight. So he needed, you know, his film stock was pretty insensitive. It was probably 500 ASA at best. I mean, we would now, I regularly shoot at 3,200 ASA with your cameras. And, I mean, there will be sequences there will have been sequences we shot in that trailer on at that ASA rating. So what did he need? He needed lenses with wide apertures, which didn't exist at that time. You know, lens technology was limited, and so that would be a perfect example. Now I think we do it as a matter of course with everybody I work with. We start from scratch, and I think, you know, but particularly with actually with I do it with lighting, and I do it in the grip world as well. You know, I have a fantastic team here who fully engage in that, and I think, you know, with lights we say, or I'm saying, what's the quality of light? You know, a lot of Superman is about sunlight to me. So what is the quality of that sunlight? So that really determines as what fixture you're going to use and what type of bulb is in that fixture.
That's interesting.
So, and that's the difference between being something kind of grounded and something being theatrical.
Was it challenging? I mean, obviously a lot of snow, a lot of white. Does it make it any harder? It's probably a stupid question, I'm sorry.
Well, it's an interesting question. When I did the Shackleton movie, which is quite a long time ago, that was about Ernest Shackleton who lost his ship in the Antarctic. All the photography around there, actually a very, very brilliant photographer, Frank Hurley, who's a New Zealander, who did these beautiful 10x8 glass prints, and interestingly shot film, and he was one of the first people to say, you know, they'd be winding the film camera, no, just walk into shot. No, you can walk out. Well, you can walk in again. Oh. And you forget, you know, when that started, and there was 1914 around then. So, but when I was sort of looking at all that material, of course it's all black and white, and so I was literally, you think, well, this area is black and white. You forget, you know, snow is white, but of course it's not. It's colourful, and subtlety of colour, and ice particularly is subtle kind of colour. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, but. No, I think, you know, like all these things, the critical thing is understanding what you're exposing your negative, and in this case you're exposing your sensor for, and making sure you're capturing what you intend to capture. So I don't think it's difficult. I think it's just knowing what you want out of the image.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's for you. So Superman, just going back to that character a little bit, is it any different for you and James Gunn approaching a character we all know so well, we feel like we know the duality of him.
Well, I think that's a question for James. I mean, funnily enough, I don't. I'm not kind of immersed in illustrated novels and comic book culture. What I will say is, I thought the whole sort of Superman history is absolutely fascinating, and it kind of got to me when we were walking around Cleveland, Ohio, and I kind of realised what the background to this was in the 1930s when it was originally written. And in some ways, you walk around a city like Ohio and you can see the hope and the pride of the city. And of course, what Superman is about is the humanity and the fallibility of humanity.
Yeah.
So, kind of seeing what the world could be versus day-to-day life walking down the street, because it started to sink in. But clearly, people really love the character, and I'm sure they will.
Oh, and the dog.
And the dog. Well, and everybody. It's about, these movies work if they're great movies, and that's what you'd set out to do, is make a great movie, and the rest of it, just shut it out. It's not significant.
And he likes spontaneity with his characters. Is that a part of being kind of in the center and the...
James?
Yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, he is unbelievably well prepared.
Okay.
And because he's a writer as well as a director, he's written, everything we see on the screen is written into the movie. And that's where it starts. However, so we're very, very well planned and very specific about what's required out of a scene. On the other hand, it's very intuitive. So I know that sounds like complete contradiction, but that's what interests him is the balance between being very clear about where the storytelling is and very specific about where the storytelling is, and yet allowing for intuition.
And you have your own kind of visual language with David, the actor who plays Superman. Is it Cornsweat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think with everybody, I think David, they're all really, really proper actors to start with, and really good screen actors. So they start from a really solid base. And David's a filmmaker too, so he kind of very quick to understand what the process was. So it's exciting.
I would say we are going to start answering some questions. So if you guys have some questions, please raise your hand. There's one that, pow, went up really fast. The woman right there. She gets the first one. Can you stand up and speak loudly?
Yes. Hi, thank you for being here. What is the number one thing a director can do to make your job easier?
I think the only thing a director needs to do is to drill down into the way they want to tell the story. They don't have to be technical. Some are, some aren't. But they just have to be able to communicate the way they want to tell a story. You might direct a scene one way, and Naida might direct it in a completely different way, and that's what's interesting about filmmaking. So, but it's our job to understand what it is that makes your type of storytelling the way it is, or Naida's type of storytelling the way it is. And I don't think you have to be particularly articulate to do that. You just have to know in your mind what interests you and what doesn't.
Okay, right here.
For Guardians of the Galaxy, you were in space,
Right.
which is weightlessness and big expansive galaxies. And with Superman, it's very vertical, look up. From a cinematographer point of view, what were some of the things you were trying to get across with your storytelling to help tell the story, whether you're in space or in a very vertical environment with people flying all over the place?
Yeah. So the kind of guiding principle there is truth. So, with flying for Superman, and I've done a lot of air-to-air photography, you kind of have to believe as an audience that we're obeying the rules of gravity or within the confines of what we understand. But interestingly, I think the space thing is the same. You know, yes, Guardians is a space opera, but it still has to be kind of grounded in some form of reality that we understand. Otherwise, we don't suspend our disbelief.
Right there.
Henry, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. My question is, your job is to honor the vision of your director and make it come through images. What happens when, like, it's not that you don't agree, but you see it different, like the way your director wants to make his vision come through? How do you navigate when you don't agree or you see it differently, when you think things need to be done in a different way? Do you back up? Do you try to show your director maybe this the other way, maybe the other way? When do you kind of let him?
Well, and any director wants input and collaboration, which means, you know, you're not just saying, yes, sir, I'll do this, no, sir, etc. That's not the relationship at all. What you're saying is you're understanding what they want to do, and where you think there's a better way of doing it, a different way of doing it, whatever it is, you argue your point. And if, you know, what you've got to do is be good at communicating. And interestingly, on these kind of movies, we're communicating with thousands of people. So, and they're all in different countries, you know, from New Zealand, Canada, United Kingdom, wherever. So, you know, you may have a way you want to do something, and I may think, well, it's a better way of doing it, or I don't understand that way. So we just have to talk, to the point, and you know, get to the bottom of A, understanding what the idea is, B, understanding what the really director wants out of it, and ultimately you're there to do the way the director sees it, but they want it to be as good as possible. So of course you're there to contribute massively, but so the guiding principle is, it's, you know, in this case it's a James Gunn movie, it's not a Henry Braham movie, so that's whose voice is going to prevail.
There was one back here I kept ignoring, so please, in the very back middle.
Yeah, what was your process on the hair and makeup test to dial in the color of the cape, for example, and maybe overall with the film seems to have a nice, vibrant, saturated color to it? What was the steps you took in that?
Well, actually, that happens way before hair and makeup. My process is that I like to shoot stuff as I go along in prep and build up a bit of a kind of library of material, and it could be random stuff. I mean, it's sort of to do with the texture and things that we're talking about. So so I'll work with, you know, the color team at that point. So by the time we get to hair and makeup tests, it's pretty much locked in, because everybody needs to know about that. You know, the costume team need to know how the color is going to render, and the production design needs to know how color is going to render. So that would have happened way before then.
And do you share the images as you're nearing the look with the team so that the
Absolutely, yeah. I'll screen it, and I'll work on the color with my colorist, and then we'll screen it for everybody. I mean, firstly we'll screen it with the director and, you know, hone it. And at the point where we said, yes, this is working, this is what this movie is, then then we'll share it with everybody, yeah.
There was a question, yeah.
I just had a question about lensing for this, because you've used the Life Center 8 and the Life Center 8 lenses on the V-RAPTOR. Your film that I was just, I wanted to see why you sort of pair those together. What does that mean?
So I like the way they look. I like the bokeh on the lenses, and I like that they're so small. And everyone keeps trying to say, "Can I have a look at this lens?" And my first question is, "Well, how big is it?"
I use them myself on my lens.
Right, there you go. So
they're just wonderful.
yeah, so small is beautiful, and interestingly, they're very precise. I'm sure you've found the same thing. So from the focus point of view, is they have to be pretty fantastic at what they do.
Yep.
How do you approach taking on, so obviously you did Guardians Volume 2, Volume 1 was done with
Ben.
Ben, yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, it's the same director, it's a continuation of the story, so the universe of those films are the same. But I mean, you obviously have your own approach, which is going to be different to his. So how do you sort of tie the visual in, but also stand out?
Well, I don't want to stand out. You know, I don't want anybody to look at the movie and say, oh, it's, you know, the photography's great, but the movie's rubbish. It's not. You just don't. The two things want to be inseparable. So if you think about it's the director's movie, then I think that answers your question. I think all three of those films kind of take a step forward in their different ways. The only time where we were thought, oh, this is specific to go, you know, we shot 2:40 aspect ratio, and personally I think actually nowadays 185, because of the interaction with IMAX, and you know, most modern theatres, there's not such a big choice between 240 and 185. I think is very present in the theatre. So, but we said, well, it's part of the trilogy, so therefore they were all shot 240, so let's stick with 240. But I think that's probably the only thing that was not restricted, but governed by that's part of the series.
Right there.
What's some advice you have about maintaining and having positive working relationships with everyone you work with?
Wow. Very good question. I think you need to ask them. I mean, you know, like anybody, we all want to work with people we respect, and it's a very, very pressured environment, so we can talk to each other directly or whatever it is, but if there's basic respect between everybody, that goes really well. And in fact, you know, I have very long relationships pretty much with everybody, and it's two ways. I want to work with people who, you know, will fight their corner and come up with better ideas than mine. I mean, that's generally my principle, is work with people who are better than yourself. So, and I think that's about it, you know, be truthful and respectful.
Back there?
I was wondering if you could give a bit of insight on your approach for prepping and executing visual effects heavy shots.
Well, firstly, most successful visual effects shots tend to be done firstly for real. So a director like James likes to build everything for real, do the stunt for real, do the special effect for real, so that the visual effect is a continuation of all of that. So a visual effect is a way of achieving an idea. It's not an idea in itself. So first thing is we will break, with any director, we break the sequence down, you know, in granular form, and we say, we're going to do this much. Then that will be taken over by the visual effects team. And it is a collaboration like that. It's just a meticulous, it's exactly the same as an architect or an engineer building a building. You know, bit by bit you build up and you split up who's doing what, and you put layer upon layer upon layer.
I have a quick question about your collaboration with the art department. Do you work on lighting with the art department as well?
Totally, yeah. I try and get them to light my sets. They you know, it's crucial because it's we talk about everything from literally the function to the, and that, you know, on these kind of movies we do that as a group, but obviously I'll do that informally. It's absolutely crucial. And then as the set's being built, you know, we'll keep revisiting it and seeing how it's evolving. It's an intense process.
That Christmas set was crazy. The Guardians Christmas special. I liked it.
It was fun.
But that must have been like really hard.
Well, it was. The set was being used for the movie at the same time, and we shot everything into Weave. So it was quite a long schedule, but it was. It was fun to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in Hollywood, so when you walked by, all of a sudden it was all decked out, and you guys were shooting. It's fun. Anybody else have another question? We've got 3 minutes left, right here in the front.
James Gunn just announced or released that they just finished all the VFX for this, and he's done. Do you get to stay involved in the finishing process to make sure that they're staying true to what you set up all the way back in prep?
Well, very much so. In fact, we did the last session this week, so we've pretty much done the movie. Totally. I mean, my process is in terms of colouring the movie, is I'll go through with the colourist. Well, bear in mind that the idea for colour has already been set before we even start shooting. So, and that will go into the dailies, but can only go so far, because dailies have a function and they've got to be visible for the editors to work with and so on. Then I'll go through the movie with the colourist and give them keyframes on each scene. They'll then put it all together. It's just like we used to grade movies in on film in laboratory. Then I'll get it in shape, and that is pretty much what the photographic intent was. And at that point, the directors will come in and we'll get down to it in more granular form. But it's fast. It's fast, and you know, they in visual effects heavy shots, they would have been working all along, but they would have been guided by all the information I would have given to them at the time we shot the material. So there's nothing new coming up. We're not suddenly reinventing the wheel at that point.
I have the last question for you. What might be some advice to manufacturers and service providers that are in the audience?
Well, interact with your customers, because I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're making ice cream or, you know, wonderful movie cameras.
Yep.
Well, I think great hem melt. But listen to your customers and keep innovating, because the innovation is what will. If you're not innovating, then you're going backwards. So keep going forward, and your customers are your cheapest form of R&D.
That is a fact. This is Henry Braham. Thank you.